Welcome to the next episode of the Iowa Girls Wrestling Stories podcast. Today is going to be a very special episode, an important episode, because we're going to talk nutrition. Last season, I brought in Courtney Blenner to come in and talk with our athletes, and I wanted to share that information with everybody because nutrition is such an important thing for wrestlers. Welcome, Courtney. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, I'm really excited for this. Let's get started just by getting to know you just a little bit better. Um, why don't you tell us about your family and maybe some of the things around the house and just your everyday life.
Yeah, so I'm a mom of two. I've got a seven-year old and a 5-year-old wife to Andy, and he farms full time. We live on his family's Century Farm, corn and soybeans, little bit of cattle, a lot of horses. Anyone who has horses knows you can't have just one. So kind of got that on the livestock side. I grew up on a rural farm in southwest Minnesota. Did a lot of 4-H and different things with the livestock there. So that's kind of been my base and my center. And then on the other side, I would say is the sports side of things. I was a gymnast for 18 years of my life and did a lot with softball. Those were kind of my two main things. Did a lot of intramural sports at South Dakota State University, dodgeball, volleyball, some like football, softball. So kind of kept that sports thing going. And so the health and wellness piece has always just been, I feel like this branch off of me, something that I've thought about. I've done a lot of the 5Ks and the running and those type of things. And so coming from college, that is where I met my husband, Andy, moved down here. And then, just kind of branching my I would say just adding more branches to kind of my background and stayed in agriculture, was in agriculture for a long time. Did in 2020, kind of when things changed a little bit, dove into my own health and wellness. We were done having kids. I was thinking, gosh, how do I get back to my high school and my college body, just craving that, and got a coach for the first time and was able to, in the last 4 years, really transform my health, really dive into, what are the things that matter and realizing it's simpler than I thought, right? The things that I was chasing wasn't necessarily the right things to chase. So then I was able to, I became a certified nutritionist. I dove into some online coaching. That's kind of been the really supplemental piece to agriculture and farming, which is kind of still the center part of me. So it's been awesome to dive into, now helping younger kids, thinking what would I have done different? And you and I talked a little bit about just thinking, you reflect back and go, gosh, if I could do it over. And a lot of it is around what I was eating and fueling my body with. And the other piece is, gosh, recovery. They may make fun of it now, but I crave that, 9 hours of sleep. And, with kids and busy schedules, that can be hard. But just thinking back to that stuff is just realizing there's such a ripple effect there. And then I guess, my latest achievement coming into 2024, I did my first bodybuilding competition, able to add that to my resume, learned a lot there. And so I'm excited to dive in and just bring those, what we would have done different or things to think about as high school wrestlers today.
That is incredible, and I follow you online and stuff, so it's amazing. And you would probably tell people it's not a number on the scale, and wouldn't you? I mean, it's how clothes are fitting, how you're looking, and it's not so much that. So this is great for the wrestlers, but this is also great for mom, and this is great for dad. So just great information all around. I really want to start with one thing that I've noticed, the last few years. Hydration, is so important in wrestling and athletics and just in life. And I don't think anybody drinks enough water. Well, I don't say anybody because some people do, but the average person doesn't drink enough water and is not hydrated. What are some benefits of hydration, and what can wrestlers benefit from hydrating properly?
Yeah, I think, when you think of how you're feeling right now, if you're sitting at work, you're sitting in school and you've got maybe this a little bit of a headache, a little bit of this fatigue feeling, Honestly, the first place I'm going to look is how is your water levels? What's your water intake like? I think that is something I completely agree with you that is underrated. We don't think about that. And just a rule of thumb, right? Where should we be for water? There is such thing as too much water. But I would, if you're starting and you're saying, well, I don't know if I'm drinking enough, half of your body weight in ounces. That's where you want to start. Now, I would say then increase that. Okay, up to I think a gallon of water a day, you're going to be fine. Anything extra, you'll pee it out, right? It'll
Yep.
leave your body. But also knowing that hydration plays such an important key to a lot. And my number one thing is like that energy piece, but also on the recovery piece is you're drinking that water and not really, using anything else to hydrate your body. You're going to feel really good. You're also going to sense like, okay, our skin's going to be a little bit different. Really, it's just like the purest form. Our body craves that. So I think when I think of a wrestler, right, what's the point of that? If you know your intake's at a certain level, you can actually use water to manipulate your weigh-ins a little bit, right? To be able to get to that weigh-in that you want to be. But you've got to know where you're at first. The other piece of it is you get to that end of the day and you've got to practice and you've got to perform. Having your water level and your intake, I know a lot of people are like, well, then I have to go to the bathroom. Your body will adjust to it, adjust to that intake. But being able to perform at the end of the day, I think has a lot of, if you kind of reflect back on my intake during the day, it's like an end of day. How am I going to feel at that point? So just knowing that it's just kind of I try to do 40 ounces in the morning, at least 40 ounces at night. That doesn't include, I do take a pre-workout, and I do get up and I drink 16 ounces of water. First thing, when I get up in the morning, I'm drinking that right away. It has this energy impact to it. And when you go to sleep, your body does not know, or when you go to sleep, right, you're waking up dehydrated. You didn't drink all night, right? So hydrating first thing in the morning. And what I was going to say is that your body doesn't know whether you're hungry or thirsty. So a lot of times we might be thinking, gosh, I'm starving. Well, drink 8 ounces of water, drink 10 ounces of water, and then decide that. So also knowing, like as a wrestler, to control your hunger signals, to control that piece, not only the performance piece, but just also how you feel. Water has a big impact with that.
Yeah, I know that I used this an example the other day with Tatum and stuff, and she always drank approximately a gallon of water a day. And so I want wrestlers to hear this because when I was wrestling, it was, hey, we're gonna cut water out for maybe a day, maybe 2 days. We're gonna wear as many sweats as we can. We're gonna just suck the water weight out of us and feel like total crap and not wrestle very well. But we got to that low weight class. So she would drink a gallon of water a day, and on that very last day, she would cut her water intake. She, didn't, probably after she woke up in the morning, did not drink any water. And she would float 3 to 4 pounds during the day, probably the most I've ever seen anybody do. And that's a 125-pound person, 130-pound person floating 4 pounds. That's a pretty big percentage. Is that in your experience? Is that what you also see, or no? Does that fact? I don't want to throw out not something that's not fact. Is that a fact?
Yeah, no, I think water has a big impact with that. And just knowing too, water and how our cells work and fill with water and deplete water. It's not just the water, it's also what we're eating, what we're fueling our body with too. So kind of keeping that in mind. Something that I learned was a myth, right? If you hear about bodybuilding, you think of like starve yourself, cut all water, cut all salt. And actually that's false. We actually the day of my competition, I carved up heavy and I actually drank a lot of water because that being able to like for me it was muscle shape, right? I wanted to fill my muscle bellies and water was a big part of that. But also knowing that, in Tatum's example, she would by feeling your body, you're going to perform better, right? She feel during the week that one day cutting probably didn't affect her as much as somebody who maybe was up and down in consumption. Weekends are a little bit lower, weekdays are maybe a little bit more calculated. If you know, and that's where having that measurement, right? Being able to measure something, whether it's our water intake, our calories, we can manipulate a lot more if we know that. So I think that's the biggest key with that.
Yeah, no, that's great information. Um, as far as female athletes and wrestlers, and there's got to be some unique nutritional needs. There's different, girls have a cycle, guys do not. So this is stuff that, as a male coach in a female sport, I don't understand everything. I try my best to learn some of these things, but is there some unique nutritional needs that females have?
Yeah, I think, if you take a step back, male and female, the biggest difference is exactly what you mentioned, is the cycle and estrogen and the hormone piece of it. If you look at it on the other side from a calorie standpoint, a protein standpoint, I think they're pretty similar, right? That any human, if you want to see that scale go down, you need to be eating in a caloric deficit, which just means you've got to be eating lower than whatever calories it takes to maintain weight. That's humans in general. But as females, you talked about that cycle is important. So as females, when we get close to our cycle, a lot of people all of a sudden, gosh, we dive into chocolate and we're diving into, right, the sweets. We're craving that. So what our body actually wants is magnesium, and our body wants carbs. So things like dark chocolate is a great choice, but not saying like that isn't the a key to unlock, okay, I get to overindulge in that. But your body does crave that. And so I also tell, I've told my clients in the past, like, let's push up our carbs, eat the fruits, eat the vegetables. Your body's just craving that. Give it what it craves. Now, it's also knowing that if you go a little too far, and you can have a Reese's peanut butter cup, you can have some of those things, just realizing if that's a trigger to kind of go into, okay, now it's the bag of Skittles, and now it just kind of keeps going. Just knowing that a little bit of that is hormones. Like, okay, hormones are pushing me towards this. That this will go away, okay, and drink your water, have some of the sweet things. You'll also notice then as our cycle starts, our energy comes back. Right before our cycle, energy, you just feel tired. You feel when we're tired, we maybe change our nutritional choices a little bit. So just if you bring that, the first part is being aware of it. Like, I must be close to my cycle. That's an okay thing, but also knowing that it isn't okay, that doesn't open the door to do what I want. So just kind of fighting that a little bit, and that gets better through practice, right? You become aware of that. You start your cycle, you get this energy surge, you feel great, and you can kind of go back to your normal eating, right? You don't have as much of the cravings or those things pushing at you. Then you'll find out in the middle of your cycle, which is around ovulation, all of a sudden our body craves more of the salt. And that, again, increase salt. I don't want people to be afraid of salt. I think that's something that our culture has said, oh gosh, salt, high blood pressure. Well, really that high blood pressure is coming from, yes, the fats and all the cooking oils and the different things. It is, it is more of sugar than it is salt, but pure salt in itself, it's okay to put that in. I actually think a lot of people don't realize that your cravings are coming from lack of salt. It's not you're craving sugar. You might actually be short in the salt department. So I'm very much a proponent of salt your stuff. If you're feeling low and middle of the day, is like, I'll just put some salt on my tongue, right? Sprinkle some salt in there. So just listening to your body, knowing as females, it's gonna ebb and flow, but also it's like, okay, practice in those moments. What does my body need? Okay. Is it pushing the carb intake and different things like that? So yeah, nutrition, it's more of, I would say, like listening to your body in those moments, but not letting it control you, right? Finding the balance in that.
Very good. Yeah, that is just really good stuff because the stuff I wouldn't know, wouldn't understand, and stuff. Now with salt, and this is probably back to a myth. Does salt really hold water weight in, or is that if that would be excessive salt, not normal amounts of salt?
Yeah, I would say, when it comes to water retention, and people will be like, oh gosh, it was, I think sodium and salt, yes, they're the same, but yet it's when you have a soup, right, that there is actually more the sugar and that type of thing that's helping that water retention versus just plain table salt in
Okay.
itself. Restaurants cooking with fats. I think you go out to a restaurant, you wake up in the morning, your fingers are they're so puffy, and you're like, gosh, it's the salt. Well, it's actually more than that. So I think from like, that was the other thing, is I never touched or paid attention to salt during my bodybuilding prep. That wasn't even talked about. So that's, I think, a myth that we can squash, that,
Okay.
that salt is doing this. I would say, think about your processed foods, right? Think about things that, what is in this? And if you ask that question and then that list is really long on the back of a label, there's more to it than just the salt. So thinking about the basics, if I have my protein and I salt it, is different than, okay, I got this out of a package, right? A processed package. They have to make it shelf stable. They are adding preservatives to it. So I would think of more of like whole food versus processed in those moments. That's the question I would ask myself.
Very good. That probably makes a lot more sense. Um, we obviously need a lot of energy as wrestlers, and day of competition or just even daily. What are some things that can give us some energy? Maybe some recommendations on what I should eat, maybe the day of, after weigh-ins, prior to competition, or throughout that day, as opposed to my normal diet throughout the week.
Yeah, great question. So when I think about performing, when I think about how do I set myself up for success, the number one thing I'm thinking about is recovery. Is how much sleep am I getting during the week leading up to that? I think that's a big piece of it because again, I mentioned this a little bit. If you are poor on the recovery department, and again, our cycle will play with that. Your body may require a little bit more sleep leading up to your cycle. I think there's some truth when people say, "Gosh, you're crabby. Go take a nap." Yep. Okay. So as women, we're going to require more in that recovery department. You also might find, well, gosh, I barely slept last night and I feel great. Again, our hormones will play with that. But what I strive for, right, that 7 to 9 hours, as women, we're going to want a little bit more, kind of that 8 or 9 hours of sleep. And this means, everyone listen, all these high schoolers, weekends matter, right? Getting sleep on weekends. It's fun to go out, it's fun to have fun, but just make sure on the backside that we're really focused on that recovery piece. So I think that's the first thing that I'm thinking about. Because if I'm not sleeping well, my choices are probably changing. So then that kind of goes into the nutrition piece. When I think about fueling our body, I wouldn't necessarily say to change my diet based off of right days or performance, but you think about you hit that weigh in, right? What happens next? As a gymnast, gosh, we got a lot of candy from our parents, like a good luck. Here's all this chocolate and candy. Just really thinking about in that moment, you're going to perform how you feel. So if I ate a bag of Skittles versus eating a couple oranges and, in a sandwich, right? I'm going to feel different in that moment than, with the Skittles. So just kind of realizing that, okay, I want to perform my best. So I want to think of fuel. When you say fuel, carbs and fats, those are our energy sources. So if you cut out carbs completely, you're going to maybe struggle a little bit from that energy department. I know a lot of people talk about keto diets. Well, why is that okay? Fats, right? You're cutting slow carb. That's what a keto diet is, low carb, high fat. As women, we want to maintain a certain level of essential fats for our hormones. So we don't want to cut fat out. I would say don't cut carbs out either. But think about there's not a good carb or a bad carb. I would just think about, again, it's how I want to feel. I think there's probably good, better, best. And you think about a carb is white bread, right? Or being able to have just bread, not the heavy pastas and different things like that, but thinking bread is fine. I don't think anyone should be scared of anything like that. Fruits and vegetables, potatoes, right? Good carb sources. Now, day of, thinking about, again, I don't want to sit with this really heavy source of carbs. You want to go with the quick digesting carbs, getting that fruit in. You mentioned a bag of oranges to have with you, a great option, right? Just thinking about, again, I'm not going to go to the concession stand and get nachos. You might feel a little meh after that, right? And I'm also want to think about the foods that I'm consuming is when my body breaks it down, what happens? So candy is going to push really elevate your blood sugar. What happens on the backside of that is then it crashes. How do we buffer that? So when I think about those things, is I'm thinking about protein and fiber. Fiber is going to be your fruits, vegetables, the quick acting starches. Those are good. Then I want you to also think on the protein side. You got your ham, your turkey. And then people, are protein bars bad? No, but I would say, a ham, turkey, cheese, that's going to be a little bit better, right? Because it's a little, again, purer form. So when I think about that is like stay light and listen to your body. Okay. I wouldn't eat just to eat, but I would eat to know, okay, am I hungry? When am I full? Stop at 80%. Don't gorge yourself. Kind of limit the candy, limit those extras, but also again, hydration, keeping that up. Gatorades are fine. I lean more towards the Gatorade Zero, but having the electrolytes again is going to keep things up. There's all like a liquid IV packet. Hy-Vee sells those. A lot of electrolytes and packets that you add to water. Those are good too. Because the other thing to think about, and I didn't mention this, is when you think about water, you think about fiber, it really helps digestion, right? If you go into weigh-in day and you haven't pooped, right, that's going to play
Yeah.
a factor. So being able to fuel your body during the week and get in a regular schedule, it honestly, and when I say schedule, is your digestion. You keep that in a good spot that day of, you shouldn't worry about anything because that's the other piece that will really help with that.
Yeah, I think I look back on all the stupid things we did to cut weight when I was wrestling in the late 80s, early 90s, that was again cutting water completely out. I mean, I remember there was times all my mom, she made me eat, so I would have a little tiny she had this really thin bread and we'd put some honey on it. That was my lunch. And
Mm.
then, I would go to a 2 hour practice in a 90 some plus degree room. um, I won't I used plastics at the time to cut the water weight out, which was actually illegal, but I hid it from my coach. So 2 to 3 days a week, I was wearing plastics. I'd come home and my mom again would make me eat. So that was probably the best thing she could do. But I mean, we had very little. A 4 ounce chicken breast, a little bit of rice, and maybe some vegetables. But half the time I wouldn't even eat that. And then I was measuring my water out. Oh my God, I'm 2 pounds over. I'll float one. Okay, I got to practice tomorrow, so I can have 8 ounces of water today. I mean, just stupid things like that. And then trying to go and, I would try to go wrestle the next, competition after doing that for 3, 4 days. It makes zero sense now to look back on it. And then when I'd weigh in, I'd have a 2 liter of Mountain Dew and probably a candy bar and maybe some sugar cereal because I'm craving what I did not get to have for the last 3 days. So uh,
Yeah.
just
How did you perform? How did you feel your performance was?
well, I was good enough in the area to do well in the area state wise. When it came to districts time, boy, and I will tell you that last day of districts, I didn't give a crap. I have pictures of me that look like I came out of a concentration camp,
Mm.
and it was just stupid. So I of course I don't want my wrestlers to do that because I ended up not liking the sport by the end of that. And then in college, I didn't cut the weight and had more fun, and I loved the sport again. So I'm trying to get our wrestlers to
Yeah.
understand these things. Um, when we talk about diets and things like that, is there kind of a protein? Is there a percentage of protein, fats, carbs, or you know, probably most high school kids aren't going to really pull their calculator out and figure out exactly what percentage of this and that. But what are some good recommendations just for meals during the week? And of course, you're going to go Whole Foods, and I know that's not always their choice, so
Yep. Yep.
but if it is their choice, what would be some recommendations for meals during the week?
Yeah, when I think back on, percentages and breakdowns, the ideal that I'm trying to hit is 1 to 1 for my weight, 2 grams of protein. So if you got a 130-pound wrestler, I want her to be at 130 grams of protein, ideally. And why that's important is that when you're going through these phases of you're cutting weight, the goal would be, right, if you could lose fat and not lose muscle, you want to keep as much muscle as you want. And so when you think about dieting, going into a calorie deficit, again, just dropping your calories lower than what you need to maintain your weight. If you're able to keep it high protein, and if you think about carbs, fats, and proteins and carbs are 4 calories a gram, which is per 1 gram. So if you got a gram of fat, that's actually 9 calories. So when I think of like, okay, how do I quickly cut weight without sacrificing energy, muscle, keeping that up? It's going from say a beef or a steak or a ribeye over to chicken or turkey because it has less fat, which means it has less calories. So when I think about that, if we can still hit a high protein amount, and I think that comes out probably about 30 to 35% of your diet. Then you have 40% for carbs, 30% for fats. Now, carbs and fats can ebb and flow. For me, in my cycle, I'm a lot higher on carbs when I get closer to the start of my cycle than, at different times of my cycle. So do I focus on that a whole lot? No, I do want to make sure as a woman in hormone health that we keep our fat grams up. So 50 to 60 grams, which is around that 30% of our diet. You can go higher than that. You can maybe, fluctuate a little bit lower, but people that say, okay, I'm just going to cut fat out completely, you're going to feel it. Your body will feel it. So just really thinking about that piece of it. When I think about meals during the week, again, it's keeping, I would say, just that balance, like going into my meals. What am I thinking about? If I have to hit, for me, it's around that 140 grams of protein. I'm splitting that into 3 or 4 meals, trying to make it even throughout the day. Now, I know we go to school, we have the lunches that they provide, which actually I think they do a decent job of having a protein source, having some carb sources in there. Thinking about, milk is a good protein source. It has some fat in it, so it's going to be a little bit higher calorie. But then, at home, can we stick with maybe it's a leaner protein, chicken breast, turkey breast, different things like that. If we can't necessarily control the lunch piece of it. And when I think about, breakfast, starting the morning, I hit my water right away. And then again, I am going to try to get as much protein as I can, at least, that 30 to 40 grams. Sometimes it's a little more because I'm like, oh, later, maybe I've got a meal out to eat. I don't know what that's going to look like. So I'm going to try to front load that. So, starting mornings off with, say it's a protein shake. I don't know, if high schoolers, I know I definitely was not a coffee drinker in high school. I am now. When
Yep.
you become a parent, I think that you have to drink coffee to survive. But in high school, right, you can start with that. I know you mentioned it, right? You want to hit that cereal, you want that sugar, right? It just gives you this like huge hit of dopamine. You're feeling great, but then in the afternoon, you want to take a nap. So really thinking about starting your morning off high protein. Can you get eggs? I do like 2 eggs, egg whites, add some green peppers or sausage. Okay, throwing that in there. But egg whites is 100% protein. Shrimp is 100% protein. So just kind of thinking about adding those things in, and I'll have a protein shake in my coffee, and then kind of couple it with the eggs and egg whites to kind of boost that up. Sometimes I have a lighter breakfast but I make sure I catch it up with a leaner beef. And beef isn't bad. What's great about being an Iowa farmer, right? That you can get beef pretty available, readily available. Is it cheap? That kind of goes back and forth. But if you can get that 80, 90% lean, you can work with it. Just knowing that a little leaner meat is going to be a little less calories, but don't be afraid of that fat. Don't be afraid of those things. I think it's just being able to find that balance in it. And I think a lot of people will how do I, you look at a label, what do you mean by protein? So if the label says it's 4 grams per protein on a serving size, the best way to determine servings, it'll say maybe one serving is 1 cup. So you got 4 grams out of that 1 cup. If I want to boost that up, I have to have multiple servings, but also knowing then calories add up as well. So when you're looking at those things, just being able to think about the serving size and you build your plate out, having a big protein source, the carbs and starches. I think like the fiber, I'm thinking of potatoes, sweet potatoes. Oatmeal is a great source of protein as well. You can put whey protein, the powder in that, and mix that up, right? Then also think about Greek yogurts. Even if okay, lunch is going to be this at school, can you bring a yogurt? I don't know if partway through the day, can you consume something? Have a shake or something, be able to have that as well. So I think just breaking apart, and it just kind of boils down to like protein matters most. And why I say that is not only are you going to maintain that muscle during your season and be able to keep that where it needs to be, you're also going to see on the backside, protein is the most satiating macro. So you got your protein, carbs, and fats. Keeping your protein up, you're going to feel more full, right? And also fiber helps with fullness as well. So that's your fruits and your vegetables. So if you're thinking like, gosh, my cravings are kicking up, well, are you a little lower on protein? Eat some of that first and then see how you feel. Those are kind of the things that I think about.
Yeah, so that's awesome. That great information. You're hitting everything I want off of this.
Are
This
you
is
are you
just
drinking from a fire hose right now? Because I'm just like, wow. I was like,
yeah,
I thought
no,
I had this little answer. We're kind of branching out, which
no,
I think is
that's
great.
no,
So
it's such good information for parents too, because and this it's I'm gonna send it out to our app as well as put it online for everyone. But I want all of my parents to know, hey, these are some things while your child's wrestling. Let's our it doesn't just have to end at wrestling either. We can do this all the time, so everybody feels better, and they'll perform better in school if you feel better. If you're not tired in the afternoon and you're not sleeping during science class, which I probably would sleep during science class anyway, but because
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
that
and I
that
think
bores
the
me.
the other piece I was going to mention is like, I mean, how do you know where you're at, right? We talked about measuring water. Pretty easy that, hey, this is 40 ounces. I'm going to drink, 2 to 3 of these. But what about, from a meal standpoint? MyFitnessPal is a great option, right? And you can
Okay.
generic track. You don't need to use a food scale, but it's going to be, again, the good, best, better, right? You're going to be super dialed in if you're weighing your food on a food scale and entering it here, but MyFitnessPal, not necessarily, I don't want you to be using it when I think about that as like a weight loss tool. Where are you at for protein, right? That's a good way to know. You can generic track and be like, hey, it was about a cup of rice, so there's my carb source, and then I'm like, okay, where's my protein at? Is how much of this am I getting? So that's just something I wanted to mention. Then jump into MyFitnessPal, track for a little bit. Even if I think about as a parent tracking for a kid, like let's just see where you're at. I'm being able to also, you can scan barcodes and take a look at it and say, okay, where is this protein at? Make a better choice because of that. So I think those little things, it's not about hammering and using that scale and getting everything perfect. It's how can I get a little bit better, right? Can I look at how many grams of protein is here? How can I increase that servings and maybe reduce my serving size on some other? So just kind of paying attention to that is that first step of that awareness piece.
Yes. So in all of this, do you recommend supplements, and maybe why would we take a supplement, whether that's multivitamin or other things? We talked a little bit about this prior to starting. So if you want to talk about supplements a little bit, that'd
Yeah,
be
I
great.
think the first thing that I ask, if a client says to me, is this good or bad? Right? My first question is why are you taking it? So a supplement is supplementing your diet. Do you need it? Right? For me, my go-tos that I feel like, there's not much on the bad side. It has more good than bad. The first things I'm thinking about, a multivitamin, right? Having those in to boost your micronutrients. That I think that's safe. A prebiotic, probiotic type vitamin is okay too. So adding that in. Then I also fish oil. As women, having a fish oil supplement is something that I put in, and again, no negative to it. So that's what I kind of think about. And if you're thinking about, okay, what about iron? What about those extras? Well, get some blood work done, right? Do you need it? If you can't answer that question, that's where I'd be like, but why are you adding it? That's where that comes from. Then I think on the supplemental side, I mean, I take pre-workout, again, just caffeine, kind of boosting that a little bit. That has some value in there on just get it because I do morning workouts. So a pre-workout is what I take. I'm whey protein. That's a good source. Again, I'm supplementing my protein because I know I'm short, right? If I track for a while and I don't have any whey protein, I'm like, gosh, okay, I got to boost that up. Now I can also tell you, and we talked a little bit about this in my bodybuilding prep that I found like, oh gosh, I can hit my protein without supplementing, but it does take a little bit more prep, right? I think a whey protein, fast, easy, convenience is the biggest reason probably why. Now I made, eggs and egg whites, and I would make up my chicken breast. Again, that all kind of takes time. But I can tell you that my skin was super clear then. I felt my best. It was so much of a ripple effect of staying using foods as much as you can to try to hit your goals without supplement. That would be the ideal, right? But also knowing, okay, starting with whey protein, if I have to have a shake. And when I first started my journey, I would have to supplement with like multiple protein supplements. Well, now it's like, hey, shake in the morning with my coffee. That's my go-to. So just kind of thinking about that whey protein. Creatine is a good thing to take. That's again, there's nothing that says it's bad. So I do add creatine. Do you have to have it? No. And then when I think of, I think people ask about like collagen. They ask about, again, it's just knowing, okay, is your hair, skin, and nails, are they really thin? Collagen could help, but it's a different protein source. So just kind of realizing when I do supplement, why am I doing it? That's a question I do ask myself. So I do think, caffeine, that's a good supplement. Again, watching and knowing if I cut my caffeine off, right, 11 a.m. is max, because otherwise my recovery. is affected on the backside. So just kind of paying attention, knowing how much of what you're having and why is a big piece of it.
Yeah, that's good information. I know I used to do a lot of weightlifting and stuff. Now, as I've gotten older, I don't do nearly as much as I should still. I probably should get back into that a little bit. But yeah, I would take a lot of supplements just because that's what everybody was doing and that was what was in the magazines, you know.
Yeah,
And I might have been
yeah.
able to do much better just by eating differently and stuff. And that's stuff that eating differently and more whole foods is something that I think probably is the biggest key to a lot of this. I know
Yeah.
as a younger person, and when we had kids, it was out of a box a lot just for convenience, and I understand that completely. But yeah, definitely, if you're an athlete, maybe they're high school kids, they could probably take care of themselves a little bit, maybe do some of their own meal prep and take that off of mom and dad's plate, somewhat.
Yeah,
They got
exactly.
to
And I
learn how to
think
cook
you,
someday.
yeah, if you think about, if we just take a step back and in general, right? You've heard all of those, a guy who lost a bunch of weight eating Twinkies only. It
Yeah,
can be done. I mean, honestly, if you're thinking about weight alone it's all about just where are your calories. Now, you're gonna feel like a Twinkie if you eat only Twinkies, right? I
yep.
want to feel my best. So it's also knowing that okay, there's other components to it, but at the end of the day, it's how much of things are you having, right? I would just want to make sure that I am protein focused, I am whole food focused. Being able to, do that is like that's how I'm gonna feel. So just kind of letting that come together. Because I think too, again, cost of things these days, it's crazy.
Yep.
So you may have to reach towards a little bit more convenience, but being able to say, okay, what's a little bit better, right? You can get frozen. It's either right, the kids frozen chicken nuggets, or I'm gonna get, frozen chicken breast, right? There's okay, a little bit of trade-off there. Being able to say, I'm gonna have this a little bit more than I have that. Just kind of looking at it that way.
Now that's really good advice, and that's something I wouldn't ever thought of. Well, chicken nuggets, that's easy. Well, the
Yeah.
chicken breast is right there too, same price, or cheaper. And if you think about it, leaner meat, chicken is cheaper than beef. And where's pork fall in all those things? Is pork more of a heavier, or is it a leaner meat? Just
I would say on the leaner side, right? If you think about that's kind of like the middle range, I would say you've
okay,
got more of your chickens, the poultry type of things, and it kind of you're going to move towards pork, you're going to get towards beef. But there's leaner options, like a sirloin is going to be leaner than a ribeye,
yep,
right? So just kind of that's when I'm in maybe a fat loss phase, I'm going to go for the filet mignon, I'm going to go for the sirloin, I'm going to go for the tenderloin. Pork chops are a fantastic option. And if lately, there's been sales on pork, and we'll buy six pork chops, we'll grill them all up at once, and then I've got my extras, right? I'm always thinking about how can I make extra. And I used to be such a leftover snob. I wouldn't touch them. I'm like, oh, leftovers, gross. Well, I don't know any other way to do it, right? To honestly have that prepped and ready for your high schooler to come home and warm up a pork chop. Like that's yes, it's not as great, but also knowing like then I thought, well, gosh, pork chop's boring. I used to smother it in gravy or barbecue sauce. Well, we'll marinate it to get it a little softer in like soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce. We marinate it up and then season it. Those seasonings are so low calorie. The salts, the peppers, the garlic salt, you can mix and match. That's where I think, okay, I don't need as much variety in necessarily what it is, right? Like how I make it, I'm going to season it a little bit different. And my best when I'm on point with my nutrition and even like in my prep, when I think about that, it was plain foods and just realizing when I feel like, gosh, this is so boring and I'm having the same thing every day, you're right where you need to be. That's actually like, okay, I'm in a groove and it's okay to eat the same thing every day. I know we think, gosh, I'm getting bored. And I tell clients, awesome. I love that you're bored. I think it's getting away with the thought that yes, we need the flavors and the exciting foods and all of this, but just knowing that, okay, that comes with a trade-off, right? And thinking every time I choose a pork chop, every time I choose a good source that's pretty plain, I brown my own ground beef versus, going to a restaurant. I'm investing in later things. And when you think about investments, when you put money in the bank, you don't see that return right away. You see that kind of trickle down the road. So by your choices you're making today have that ripple effect down. And I think from a wrestling standpoint, You think about your off season. You think about those other things of like, gosh, that what you're doing in the off season will play with in season stuff. And what you do in season, or maybe like maybe you make weight and you say, ah, what does it matter now? Right? That it all has this investment, this ripple effect to think about.
Yeah, no, that's really good because I know I made weight and I didn't care till the next weigh in, and
Yeah.
so it was a huge cycle of gain weight. Oh, I got to cut that off. Gain weight, got to cut that off. So that's what I'm trying to get away from with the girls. And you know, I know we're in a different time now, and they have to do body composition. I believe the girls can go to 12% body fat, and I still believe that. Do you know I mean, what would be do you know that? I mean, I don't know if that's more of a doctor question or not, but 12% seems kind of low for high school girls. You know, and I don't
Yeah,
think,
I don't know that. I do know, as you think about when I'm at 12%, that's pretty lean, right?
yeah,
But so I think from a female perspective, the number that's thrown out there now as an adult female, like around that 15%
okay,
as being able to like that. Again, our bodies need fat for hormone health. So, but I think 12% is not unhealthy, right? I
okay.
kind of hover around like 13%, 13, 14 holidays, that's going to drift up a little bit, but I wouldn't say 12 is unhealthy, but that is pretty
It's,
lean.
yeah, I know that we don't, I don't think there's any of our girls unless they're already at that percentage, you know, and they walk in the door that get near that percent because I try not to go over 5 to 6 pounds weight loss before you're at your next weight class because that's kind of just you know, that's just working out, you know, going from not maybe being in a practice room every day to you know, maybe changing diet a little bit. So I don't like to see them lose a lot of weight. Again, I want them to enjoy the sport. um, I think you've given us some awesome information. And one of the things I always like to do on this is just, you know, kind of a final thoughts. You can give us some great profound statement, or you can just, you know, whatever's on your mind right now for the girls, maybe a little bit of advice, whatever you want to throw out there as a like a final statement for us, maybe, you know, recommendations or anything.
Yeah, when I think one one statement, one thought that has stuck with me since the start of this journey, I would say in the last, 4 years, the statement of you cannot outwork your diet. You cannot outwork your diet. And that is something I have to remind myself as I'm thinking when I'm making a choice. On the backside, I was like, well, I've got, a workout tomorrow. I can run it off tomorrow, right? Knowing that your choices, again, it's an investment, but also knowing that if I can, gosh, you talked a lot about, I think this goes to say the mental piece of this, and even as an adult, as you get older, when you're able to break that cycle that you said, right, you cut and then overeat and cut, and you're just kind of up and down and you hated the sport. That's where I think the mental aspect comes in is how do you stay in love with what you're doing, right? Stay in love with wrestling in your sport is really thinking about, okay, it's not how do I cut this out and do less of this or more of this. It's just like, how do I get better at what I'm already doing is something that I think is a big piece of it, right? Is that big like mental piece of it. And again, like as an adult getting out of that diet cycle. And I'm just thinking, okay, like you said, it's not about the scale anymore. It's about me. I want to take all my groceries in on one trip, right? It's how strong can I get here? How strong can I get in for me, I don't really have seasons necessarily, but seasons of life, right? Summertime, I want to look the best. So I'm going to put in that work and make sure that I'm lifting and eating right. Other times of the year to be that ripple effect for summertime. As wrestlers out of season, that's the time to change your body composition. That's the time to build as much muscle as you can and that without, limiting any fat gain. So what that means is you have to eat in a surplus to gain muscle because you're building tissue. So thinking on that matters. Can I build and manipulate there, knowing in season, I want to do as little as possible. That's how you stay, I think, just stay mentally sane, right? And stay happy with what you're doing. So just realizing that it's never about like, gosh, if I would have told myself that won the number on the scale, right? In gymnastics, I wasn't weighing in and I wasn't doing any of those things, but if I wanted to perform my best and maintain muscle and going into, I remember my senior year, I went into that my fall semester. It was a winter sport in Minnesota. That fall semester, I took this weightlifting class. It was just to fill a credit, and I was like, I honestly didn't take it serious. But I went into that season. They're like, even my coaches noticed, like, you're leaner now, right? I came into that how I wanted to perform, and my no injuries, right? Those things didn't happen because I was prepped and ready for it. So. I think it's just always knowing, okay, our diet matters. That what we do at all times kind of matters. So just never try to outwork your diet. You've got to start there, right? Got to be thinking about that piece of it. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. I absolutely love doing this podcast because I get to talk to uh, great, strong female leadership. You're a definite role model for girls, and it was great to have you. I was great having you last year come in and talk to the girls, but this I think we're going to be able to maybe reach a few more families and households and stuff. So I'm really happy you did this. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was great information, and I really appreciate it. Um,
Yeah, you're
you know,
welcome. And I think too, you said social media. I'm that fit farm her on Instagram. Try to put out like relevant information, sometimes something funny, something out there. Otherwise, Facebook, Courtney Blenner. If there's any questions, need any help, I'm here. So I'm anything you need.
Appreciate it. All right. Well, I'm gonna end this real quick and go ahead and stay on for a minute.